What's up, enthusiasts? It is your boy Rob back with another video. We're going to take a look at a video that's somewhat old by a few months now, but it's from Tabletop Minions. It's about 3 wargaming rules that he believes need to be done with, and let's just see if we agree with them. Here we go.
In this video, I'll tell you about 3 different mechanics that pop up in many different wargames rules these days, and I wish they didn't.
I already know where we're going to go with this video.
I like to talk about wargaming rule sets on this channel from time to time, and it's for several different reasons. Number one,
that everyone hates.
The rules are how you play the game. It's not the lore, it's not the art, it's not even like the models or the terrain, it's the rules that drive the experience of the gameplay. You may be really into the intellectual property of a certain game franchise. I kind of referred to it as vibes in a relatively recent video. Pachow. But if you're going to be playing the game, for that IP, whether it's the attached rule set for that game or you're going to decide to move the lore, that you like over to a different rule set that you like more, either way, rules are super important. Secondly,
yes, they are. Obviously, you can't play a legit game without solid rules, or at least, even if the rules are kind of flaky, you still need a good baseline to go off of to kind of keep order and consistency from game to game. So I think the first thing he is going to point out that needs to go is like a roll to move. Let's just go ahead and get this out right now. I know roll to move is going to be on this list. I am not a huge fan of roll to move, but I'm not one of those guys that's like, if I see it in the game, I just, scoff at it and just turn away and act like I can't play it.
I've been designing miniature games with my good friend Vince Venturella for the last 3 years now. He does the majority of the rules design, of course, and the writing and whatnot. But we meet weekly, and he bounces, the new systems and rules that he's designed off, off of me, and then, to get my feedback and stuff. And then I do this.
Having a good partner when you are designing games is essential. Just someone that, like he said, you can bounce ideas off of. Someone that has a lot of gaming experience is obviously better suited for a situation like this. You don't want to have someone that rarely ever plays games or isn't necessarily into the hobby critiquing your rules and your different concepts that you're coming up with.
Same with the art and the layout and the visuals, which is kind of my area, right? I bounce that stuff off of him. It's because we're collaborative. But with all of the games that we've designed in the last 3 years, it's kept gaming rules and what I like and don't like pretty front and center in my mind. So I want to tell you about some things, some mechanics and stuff like that I don't personally like to see in wargaming miniatures design.
Let's get to this
my
list.
Opinion, right? Now, some of them are newer things that you start to see, and some of them have been around for like a long time, probably too long, in my opinion. However, I'm not doing this to call out specific companies or designers or anything like that. I'm doing it to help you maybe realize what it is about certain rule sets that bug or annoy you.
I will say I can't say this is a mechanic more so than a rule set, but card-based like combat systems I don't typically like. Now, I know that's not necessarily rules, and it's more of mechanics, but we're still talking about it. But yeah, anything that's like a card-based kind of like combat system, I typically don't like. It seems like they just play slow, and there's not that sense of, excitement.
You to kind of start a discussion in your own mind, or maybe even, in your gaming group, about what you like and dislike in wargaming rules. My hope is to help you start to find games that you enjoy playing. All right, so the first thing that I don't enjoy in wargames, custom dice. Now, I don't mean like fancy six-siders with like a cool logo printed on the six.
Custom dice immediately just drives the cost of the game up. You can't play the game without those custom dice. They're still the same polyhedral dice we use from role playing and everything else. They, instead of the numbers, they just have image or logos or symbols. and it would just be too much of a headache to convert, these dice all the time. But yeah, most games that have these custom dice, I mean, you're typically looking at an extra $10-$20 of cost to be able to get into this game, unless you buy a starter set where normally these custom dice, there are never enough of those dice in these starter sets. So
or whatever, because honestly, I have custom Tabletop Minions D6s that I'll start selling eventually online, through the website.
Those are different,
whatnot.
though. Those are
I've
just
been
like
selling them at local conventions and things like that
side.
around here for years. So it's not that. Those are fine, if you're into that kind of thing. When I say custom dice, I mean dice with specific symbols designed only for use with a specific game, right? They've got special symbols on there and all that kind of stuff, and they're designed just for this particular game.
I feel like every Star Wars game is like this. I think, okay, yes, Star Wars games always have custom dice.
Star Wars Legion, Star Wars Shatterpoint, Marvel Crisis Protocol.
Oh, that's another one.
Man, like Atomic Mass and Asmodee love that custom dice life, evidently.
Yeah, so Asmodee, who bought Fantasy Flight several years ago, but Fantasy Flight was like notorious for producing games that had custom dice, and they have just ran rampant with that design choice.
And, but there's certainly plenty others as well. The excuse that I hear for making custom dice for your war game is that it gives the designer, far more outcomes and resolution possibilities than just using regular, like, six-sided dice or whatever.
I find that hard to
This
believe.
can sort of be true, right? Usually regular dice only give you kind of simple outcomes. You need to roll a 3 up, which is to say 3 or higher, or 4 up, which is 4 or higher, or whatever.
Well, I don't know, because you could always just design the game or have the mechanics say, if you roll a 3, this happens. If you roll a 4 or 5, this happens. So, I mean, a number on a die is essentially a symbol in itself. So, I mean, I think we just associate numerals with levels of success. So it's just easier to say, okay, 5+, you hit, in it. But I mean, I think it's obviously doable to take numbers and then just assign different outcomes to each number, just like you would with any custom dice game.
There's a lot that you can do with standard dice as you roll just like a few more of those dice. If you even just throw 2d6, right? The 2d6 gives you this really interesting bell curve in the results that can really sort of expand on the way that the rules can show and utilize randomness. Here's an example of not needing custom dice, right? There was this game called Wrath of Kings that I really enjoyed years ago. It was made by Cool Mini or Not, who loves to make miniatures games. And then
that game had some really cool miniatures. It was one of those things, like, when that game went to like the discount bin, it was like snatched up by a lot of people at that point because they just liked the models. It had like almost this like Asian inspired, like anime style kind of art that was really incorporated well into the miniatures, and then the artwork associated with it. It was a clean looking game. I just didn't know anyone that actually played the actual game.
And cancel them. As far as I can tell, that really is part of the business model. I'm not sure how that all works. But anyway, they made really cool models. It was a really cool game, had cool lore, all that kind of stuff, and then they canceled it. Anyway, in Wrath of Kings, every single unit that you'd have in the game, no matter what it was, a hero unit, a regular unit, whatever, they all had this little kind of bar next to them, like in the book and stuff like that, and it was a 1 through 10 bar. So you would take a D10, a 10-sided die, and you would throw it, and then it would give you a number, a 4, let's say, for example. And then you would look for that creature, and you'd see a little bar next to them, and you'd look at the 4, and next to the 4 there would be a little symbol, and that symbol would maybe mean miss or hit or crit or like lots of different possible states and things like that. The trick is that every single creature, unit, whatever in that game had a different little bar next to it. So they could very easily make it so that, well, this creature rarely ever hits. So they're all misses until you get to the 6. But then when it does hit, it does tons of damage. Or maybe this particular model hits a lot but never crits or whatever. And then in that situation, using a normal 10-sided die, you can get a lot more possible outcomes for all the different units than making these like specific custom fancy schmancy dice that a person has to buy extra if they lose them and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a really cool idea. It's somewhat like what I was just saying. But I don't know why that game just really failed the way it did. I don't know if Simon just wasn't pushing it, or they saw no future in it. I don't know.
It just makes more sense if you want to have that kind of granularity and change things up so much to put it on the card or on the page or whatever, as opposed to putting it on the dice. Generally, I believe that companies want to use custom dice for their games because then it's just another thing that you have to buy from them. Say what you will about Games Workshop's overpriced fancy schmancy,
Woo! Listen, if you are paying $30 plus for D6, you got a problem. You got a problem, my peoples. I know there are people out there that are like dice hoarders, dice junkies. I've got more dice than I will ever need. I give people dice all the time. I don't have a lot of custom dice. I'll have dice that, will have like a logo side or whatever like that. That's a little different sometimes. But if you're like, I need to have 6-sided dice, some D6 with the 6, with the logo representing the 6, and you're willing to pay $30 for it, that is, we need to sit down and we need to have a chat. We need to talk to you about your priorities, my man.
D6s, they're not required to play the games. They're just nice to haves, and you can take them or leave them. You can also use white D6s that you pull out of old Yahtzee games that you pick up at the thrift store too, if you want. GW don't care. But try and play like Fallout.
While we're on this subject about dice, do you guys know anyone that will sit there and like roll the die and be like, oh yeah, this one rolls good, or no, this die rolls bad? Like they actually consider the weight of the die. I know sometimes I'll open up board games and I'll kind of roll it and I'm like, okay, the die feel good in my hand. But I don't actually like have a preference of which die I use when I start playing these games. I mean, obviously, if it's the die type is hit or miss. Obviously, I prefer. I like D8. I like D8 for some reason. A lot of people don't like D8. I like D8. But I know for a lot of people, D6 are those dice that they really like want to sit there and like balance the dice and check out the edges. If it's a soft edge or rounded edge, or if it's like a sharp edge, it all matters to them. Like it really makes a difference when you're rolling dice that's completely random.
Wasteland Warfare without their crazy custom like weird D12s. That's a problem. The next thing that I don't really like to see in war games rules, I go, you go activation.
Yeah, I don't like that either. But one more thing about the dice. I don't like having custom dice. For one major reason. This is the major reason. I don't know if he didn't say this. I don't know why he wouldn't point this out to you guys. But in a game where you have to have custom dice to play the game, and I know you could always do the conversions and stuff like that, but who's going to do all that? If the game ever becomes out of print, or the dice become out of print because the company goes under, whatever the case may be, you lose a die, you are completely shot. You can't do anything with it. You're dead in the water, because if the game needs a particular dice for you to play, and especially if it needs multiple, like we just saw with the Wasteland, Fallout Wasteland game, your game is pretty much useless if you don't have the dice. So if it's ever a company, they go under, they had custom dice, maybe you find the game, maybe you lost a die, now you got a box. You got a box with some bits and pieces in it.
Which is basically the way that Warhammer 40K does it. If you
go,
don't know what it was called, it's called I Go, You Go. What it means is that when it's your turn, you move your entire army, right? Then you shoot with your entire army. You charge and fight, pretty much with your entire army, who's ever within hand-to-hand combat range and all that kind of stuff. And the only thing that your opponent does during most of your turn is, roll some armor saves and maybe generally a little bit of hand-to-hand combat.
All right. So the You Go, I Go. I'm not a fan. I don't like You Go, I Go. I think there are very clever ways that you can do a You Go, I Go system. I'm actually working on a game. It's actually complete. And if you are subscribed to my Patreon, which is free, by the way, for the entry level, you will have access to this game. But basically what I've done was it's a You Go, I Go system, but it's in phases, all right? So you've got like a movement phase, and then you've got like a first round of combat, then a second round of combat. But with the movement phase, what I did was to speed up movement. One player moves all of his guys, and the other player moves all of his guys. And then I transition from a You Go, I Go system to a model activation system. So then it goes from the person with priority activates one character, and then the opposing player activates one character for combat. So guys, take a look on my Patreon and you will see that and some other things that I've created there. And that will be in the description.
If they're already engaged with an enemy. Then, once you are finally done, then it's your opponent's turn to play, and then you just sit there. The turns alternate like this, like I go and then you go, hence the name, until the game is over. That's it. And I find it pretty boring. At least in Age of Sigmar, you roll to see who goes first every turn, and not just at the beginning of the game only once, right? Therefore, in Age of Sigmar, you could have a player who goes at the end of, let's say, turn 2, and then goes again right away at the beginning of turn 3.
Yeah, that could be a problem, especially if you're rolling poorly and you're always losing the initiative, and your opponent is just getting the opportunity to outposition you every time, and he's getting those attacks off first. That can be very frustrating.
And both players kind of have to plan for that possibility. In 40K, the order is picked at the very beginning and doesn't really change at all during the game. But there are tons of other, and I would say more interesting, activation systems out there for tabletop wargames. Heck, even, Legions Imperialis, which is also from Games Workshop, uses a better activation system than most of the rest of their bigger kind of army games. In this game, in Legions, it's alternating activation, but it's phased. So it's the movement phase. I move a unit, you move a unit, I move a unit. We go back and forth like that. And then when it's like shooting, then I shoot with a unit.
All right, so the one thing I don't like about that, so I've never played the game, so it may work smoothly for that game, but I could just see a larger battle game like that. I could see that taking so long. It'd just be very tedious kind of just to sit there, because you don't always know where you want to move all your troops. So if my opponent goes and then I'm thinking about it, and I guess you could say, okay, well, maybe you could think about it while your opponent's moving, but sometimes you need to actually react to an opponent's move. So if you thought that you were going to move unit A, but your opponent moves into a favorable position, then you've got to react to that. So now you're changing your original plan. And so I can see where that could really draw out just the movement phase. And again, this is why with the game I just created, War of the Alliances, with the one side moving all of their units and then the other side moving all of their units, and then the gameplay switching up as it goes into the combat phase. I think it's piece de resistance. You got to try it out.
And then you shoot with the unit, and all that, and then we get to combat. So it's alternating, but it's still this happens in this phase, and this happens in this phase, and that kind of stuff, right? And then there are other games out there that use alternating unit activations, where you pick a unit and then you do all of the stuff that they can do, moving, attacking, all the other special actions maybe that they have available to them.
Obviously.
And then your opponent does the same with one of their units. But activation can be based off of stats, like in Star Wars X-Wing, or by like pulling a die
God, I
randomly from a
have
bag.
not played Star Wars X-Wing in so long. I remember when it first came out, and a friend and I went out and got starter sets. I think we got starter sets from like a Target or something like that. And it was fun. We played it. I think we ended up getting like 2 starter sets. And then we went and bought a few ships. But my buddy, he went like all out. He's buying up everything as it came out. And then once they switched over to the second edition of the game, he was kind of burnt out by then. I think he just sold everything. And I had stopped playing like well before that. I think I only played for maybe the first few months of the game being out.
Like in Bolt Action, there's tons of options. Why does it matter? Well, because the rules are making the story happen in your games as you play them. In Bolt Action, as I mentioned, there's like a serious fog of war going on. It's World War II, and there's explosions and smoke in the air, and you don't know what's going to happen next. Hence why you pick a die, either in your color or your opponent's color, like randomly out of the bag to see who goes.
Now, yes, Bolt Action has a really random activation system, but it's favorable to the theme of Bolt Action. I played Bolt Action first edition. I've got it on my bookshelf behind me. Was one of my favorite games, and I wouldn't mind getting into. I think they're on their 3rd edition now, but I'd have to do it in a smaller scale. But yeah, Bolt Action has a great activation system for the type of game that it is. It can get a little one-sided if the person that's pulling the die are, primarily pulling their color out of the bag. But that just shows, like he says, that fog of war element, and you really having to think on your toes.
Next, in I Go, You Go, it's more of a foregone conclusion. But war doesn't happen in an orderly fashion, Also, I Go, You Go makes it really boring for the person whose turn it isn't. So there's that too.
Yeah.
And the last rules mechanic that I could do without, bad list customization. The worst offender amongst the games that I know is the 2021 version of Kill Team. I loved Kill Team 2018 because you could really build the type of list that you wanted to for your force. Now, sure, you couldn't use every model available in a faction from Warhammer 40K, right? Like you couldn't be like, I'm going to put in a land raider.
I'm really having a hard time understanding his point on this one. I feel like bad list or bad list building is more so on the player versus the mechanics of the game. I feel like that's not a mechanic. I mean, I don't know, guys. Is that a mechanic? I feel like list building isn't necessarily a mechanic of the game. It's not like it's a rule. It's like these are the guidelines that you have to abide by to play the game, to keep things somewhat balanced. But list building, bad list building, I don't know. Let's see where he goes with this.
But you could use a lot of the foot troops, especially when they released the Elites add-on kind of later on, like 2019, I think. Then along came the new version of Kill Team in 2021, and then your force could only field between 1 and 2 types of units, and only certain numbers. In most games, you're given a bunch.
Well, see, I think something like, I don't know, that's a hard one. I don't know if I would have had this on it. It's his list. It's his opinion. We're just reacting to it. And since we're reacting to it, I'm just going to say I feel like this one just doesn't fit.
Bunch of different types of units to choose from. And then, those units, or maybe models, if it's a skirmish game instead of an army game, they all have a certain value, or they have points or something like that. And then you have a fixed number of points to spend on your force. And then you just do the math. Sometimes there are other requirements for the force as well, besides just the maximum amount of points. Maybe you have to include a leader character, or maybe you can only field a certain number of a specific unit so you don't spam too many of them, or whatever. But you as the player have a certain amount of agency over your own force, and that's important to making them feel like your own force. In the new version of Kill Team 2021, if you use the compendium specifically, then you can usually only take like 2 fire teams. And that
Again, I don't see this isn't like a rule. I mean, it's a rule, but it's again, this is list building. This is more so like the structure of the game. It's like this is more so for balancing purposes, not necessarily for like game mechanics. So I don't it this seems like a weird choice to put into this list of game mechanics slash rules that he feel like aren't viable anymore. I just feel like because this list building situation is so attached to kill team in this situation, I just feel like you can't apply that to any other game. Whereas I can apply you go I go, I can apply roll to move. We can apply like diceless combat. I mean, that could be one thing where you can say, well, that's. I feel like that has more legitimacy to be in this list than bad list building.
means only 2 different types of units. Now, it could be 2 of the same unit, which would be even kind of worse, or you can use 2 different types of units. That's mainly the long and short of it, pretty much. You might get to tweak some weapon choices on the units, but not too much, I don't think. My old favorite Necron kill team was a combination of immortals, warriors, a single death mark, and then some flayed ones that I had made myself because the new ones weren't out yet. There's like no way to make that list, in the new version of Kill Team. Now I know some of you are typing in the comments right now, but you like Combat Patrol and Spearhead, Uncle Adam, and there's no list building in those games. And you're right, but I look at those 2 different kind of games, as easy beginner forces to get a player into 40K and Age of Sigmar, respectively. That's what they were built to do. And a big problem that new players have is something called analysis paralysis when trying to build a new list. If you just give them the list up front, right, so that they don't have to worry about, well, how many of these should I take, and did I take enough of those, and do
I don't know. I feel like that's just part of wargaming in itself. Even in very simplistic games where it's like they give you a roster of guys you can take, there's usually substitutions that you can make. Maybe I'm not thinking about a game that's out there, but guys, let me know if there's a game that's like a gamer, like a real wargaming. Like, don't pick something that you find at like Target or something where it's like, like a kid's game or something. For a real tabletop wargaming experience kind of game that people in the hobby would be playing, I don't. No game comes to mind where it's like, here's what you got. You can't do anything about it. You can't change anything. You can't sub anybody in or out. This is your force. Have at it. And if there is a game out there like that with no options at all, I just don't see it having much of a shelf life. You'll kind of play the game. You'll play what it has to offer, and then it's done.
I have enough points and all that kind of stuff? It just allows them to then focus on learning the game. Both of those formats, no matter what GW says, again, are designed to get you into the bigger games. So those are the 3 main things that I don't like to see in wargaming rule sets. There are plenty of runners-up, like really massive, giant, thick rule books with way too many rules, and also
that's a pet peeve of mine. I feel like there's no reason for a rule book to be over 60 pages. Honestly, I feel like you don't even need to be near 60. I know a lot of times we're talking about fluff because there's got to be some world building incorporated and artwork and all that stuff that really pumps up the size of these the page counts. But honestly, I think a good solid rule set should be able to be I'd say around that 30, 40, 50 page mark. I think it'd be really good. I think that's enough page count for you to fully explain the concept of the game, give examples, go into the minute details.
games that require very specific models or terrain to play. But these three things that I just mentioned are the biggest red flags that generally keep me away from some war games these days. Do you agree with any of my choices? What do you think about him? Do you
left
disagree?
roll to move.
Do you
He left roll to move off. How do you leave roll to move?
have other choices that you don't like to see in wargaming rules these days? Let us all know down in the comments below. If you like videos like this, then it would be great if you'd hit the like button down there. It really helps out the channel. It helps out me. More people get to see this kind of video. If you'd like to see videos like this every single Friday, there's also a subscribe button down there that you can click on for free. Thanks for...
All right, guys. Give Uncle Adam a like. Go over. I'm going to leave the link to this video if you haven't seen it already, or you haven't watched it on his channel. Go make sure you go and like it on his channel. Really great channel, Tabletop Minions. Have been watching him since I've been watching Uncle Adam since he was on Beast of War way back in the day. I don't know how long he was there, but I know he's got a few videos when he was over there. But yeah, show him some love, guys. Make sure you like my video if you like hearing my commentary, getting my reactions on what the other tabletop influencers care about, and what they think about what's on their mind. You hearing what's on my mind. But guys, I enjoy it, and like always, I'll see you when I see you.